second, I'm just recording. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Facebook Fact or Fiction. Thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Joanna Namath, and I'm the Instruction and Reference Librarian at AU Library. And I'll let my colleagues at AU Library introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Rempel, and I'm the Information Literacy and Resource Access Librarian at AU Library. Nice to meet you all.
Hi, everyone. I am Doris Nussbaumer, and I am the Associate University Librarian overseeing the learning and research services there.
Thank you. And from Alice B. Donahue Library and Archives, we have Cheryl Andrews and Regan Holt, and I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Pardon me.
Cheryl, I think you're on mute.
There, sorry, I couldn't get at the button. Anyway, here we are. I'm Cheryl. I'm the programmer at Alice B. Donahue, and we're excited to be partnering with the AU librarians again for another great program. So, and then Regan, you're there somewhere too.
Hi, I'm Regan. I'm the summer program coordinator and a clerk at Alice B. Donahue Library. Like Cheryl said, we're really excited to be partnering with AU again.
Awesome. Thank you for that. We're really excited as well. For everyone not in Athabasca, Alice B. Donahue Library and Archives is the public library in Athabasca, and that's where our that's where AU Library is headquartered. So it's great to work with the local community. All right, so here are our learning goals for this session. By the end of the session, you will be able to evaluate the information you find on Facebook, then think critically when using Facebook, and think critically about what you are sharing and why. So here's our agenda for this session. We'll go over how we use Facebook and how the newsfeed works. We'll talk about user-generated versus standards-based content, and we'll go over fact-checking and private Facebook groups. And then we'll end with conclusions and questions. And we'll stop recording at that time as well. So if you would like to ask questions on video, you can do that without feeling like you have to share your screen. So we're going to start with an activity. So we have a word cloud here, and we want to know how you use Facebook. So what you do is text 37607 as the number you're texting, and text Joanna Namath 126 as the content of your text. And then you can start texting different words in of how you use Facebook. So you might say for socializing. If you're not getting it to work or don't really feel like trying, you can also just write in the chat box and we will add them for you. So I'll give you some time to get that started. It's best to use one word or not use a space because the words will come up separately. There we go. Wow, getting some really good ones here. Family and friends. I thought it was a really cool way to kind of share how everyone thinks about using Facebook. Gossip, that's a great one. Awesome. So we're getting a lot of family, events, communication, connection, a lot of different versions of connection, staying informed, groups. Awesome. All right, so I will continue on. Thanks for taking part in that. We'll have a couple other activities like that during the presentation. So you can also, I think, just leave the same chat or the same text window open to use later on as well. So how do we use Facebook? Obviously, we have lots of good ideas here. Some things we're going to focus on or think about are, especially during the pandemic, when we're all at home, Facebook and social media are our main way to communicate with those around us. So as we said, keeping in touch with friends and family in other cities, connection, and knowing the latest. Because we spend so much time on Facebook, we also end up doing some shopping, or at least researching brands. What have my friends been using? What am I looking for? Oh, that ad is just the new camping mattress I needed. Oh, these sunglasses are buy one, get one free. Yes, please. My friend's friend is selling a great couch and it's only 2 blocks away. And whether knowingly or not, we take in a lot of our news updates on Facebook, especially if we're on there a lot, because that's how we're socializing. These little bite-sized pieces of news are called snack news. The purpose is not to deeply engage with any information, but to get an overview. This can be useful, but it also gives us the impression that we know more about a topic and what's actually going on than we actually do. Even the Dr. Seuss scandal recently, I wasn't actually interested enough to read an article about it, but I was aware that some of his stories were no longer being published. I had no idea how many, which ones, or really much else. So here's an example of snack news. It doesn't have to be problematic. Now in the future, I'm going to be able to note that there is wine that's aged in space. I should make a point of not sharing this information until I fully engage with the material. That way I can actually keep up a conversation if someone's comments on it. But if a friend I trust posts something that upsets me, perhaps that my favorite Dr. Seuss book is getting cut due to something I dislike, it's easy to just do a quick emotional share without reading more. This is what we want to avoid and how incorrect and dramatic content gets shared. So now we'll get into a little bit of how Facebook works. Instead of having an editor decide what articles, ads, posts you see, the algorithm anticipates what you will want to see. Rather than showing posts chronologically, it posts what it thinks the user wants to see. This is based on what posts you have interacted with before. It will give you similar ones. It's going to try and think of what they think you want, which posts you linger on for longer, and which ads you share or like or comment on. It can be hard to anticipate the algorithm, as it's not just one algorithm, but multiple layers of machine learning and models and ranking. So it's basically computerized ranking of what you seem to want to see. So here's some history about the algorithm and the newsfeed. You can see that the newsfeed started in 2006, shortly after Facebook was born. Then the like button the next year. Then you can see that we started to get a sorting order in 2009, but users originally got to prioritize based on a see first model. Then we get into reactions, interactions, and time spent on different posts. This type of ranking is really clear, and time spent on different posts. Yes, you can see that. So you can see this type of ranking becomes really clear if you go onto a site like TikTok, because it shows you one video, and however long you stay on that video, it shows you more like that, more like the ones you stay on for longer or potentially watch 3 times. So I know whenever I'm on there, I just spiral into these odd existential animal videos and I get nothing else. It's a good way to kind of test out what the algorithm seems to think you're interested in. This prioritizing the news feed to what users want to see seems to have been set up with good intentions to give you an enjoyable experience. But it also means you aren't getting a proper overview of what's actually going on. I know my feed tends to only post the news I'm actually interested in and nothing else, so I don't have a glimpse of the world. But This leaves us with the impression that we're scanning all the news sources and know what's going on in the world like you would have if you were to browse a newspaper. So some way that the algorithm ranks us is by relationships. Is the post from a person, business, news source, or public figure that the user often engages with? Content types. What type of media is in this post, and which type of media does the user interact with most? So videos, maybe you look at more videos or photos or links. Popularity. How are people who have already seen this post reacting to it, especially your friends? Are they sharing it, commenting on it, ignoring it, smashing that angry face? And recency, how new is the post? Newer posts are placed higher. So what can you do to change your feed? Well, you can't fully get rid of posts you don't want to see, and it is good to get a full perspective of what's going on. You can tailor which Facebook friends you do and do not want to see information from. So the See First feature allows you to put a person's post at the top of your feed. You can go into settings and privacy on the top right of your Facebook account, and then select news feed preferences and choose your See First friends. If you've heard too much from someone, you can unfollow them, obviously. And if you want to take a break from someone, like they're really dramatic about something that you don't really want to engage in or see, it's stressing you out, you can press the snooze feature, and that will snooze them for 30 days. It's also a good idea to think about your boundaries. While it might seem cruel to unfollow someone, if they're just causing you stress or panic or frustration, it might not be worth keeping them on your feed. I was listening to a podcast about boundaries last week, and they suggested that the block feature should actually be called the closure feature, but that was kind of fair. So that's mostly to do with user-generated content. So now Jen's going to talk to us about the difference between user-generated and standards-based content and what we can do to combat misinformation with standards-based content.
All right, thank you, Joanna. So I'll turn my video on while I'm speaking. So thank you for that introduction to how Facebook works and the algorithms. Yeah. So one thing that's important to understand about your Facebook feed is the difference between user-generated and standards-based content. So user-generated content is material that's created by Facebook users. It's usually an individual or a small group. So memes, you know, there's that combination of image and text that you see all the time on Facebook. You know, a picture of a raccoon saying, I don't know, hold my beer. You know what I mean? Like, you know, those images you see all the time on Facebook, the memes. Yes. Those are an example of user-generated content. And these items are usually anonymous and they provide no context for the information they present. There are no standards or guidelines at all for this content. Anyone can create and post anything they like on Facebook, really. Standards-based content is material that's created by an organization. That's usually a news publisher or your government, for example. We're seeing a lot of those with COVID, a lot of government standards-based content that's being promoted to promote healthy activities. Standards-based content, like news articles or this government-based information, is not anonymous. So you can always find out who, or usually, typically, find out who created it and why. These items also provide context for the claims they may be making, and the publishers of this content typically do have standards or guidelines to uphold. There's journalistic standards, editorial standards, that kind of thing. So on the left, on the next slide, here you can see this is a user-generated meme. So you've seen tons of these before. The image and the text just put together, usually to create an emotional response, an angry reaction, or a happy one, or whichever. You can't tell who made this, and it really provides no information about this supposed quote, right? But on the right here, you can see under standards-based heading there, you can see an example of standards-based content. So this article was posted on Facebook by The Guardian, and the author's name, if you go into the article, is attached to it, and it provides actual information. Memes typically are just a statement with no real information attached to them. Okay, so unlike most memes you will see on Facebook that are designed to use pithy quotes to elicit an emotional response, news and governmental organizations provide actual information and the context for it. So if you click through that article, you can read more about Antifa and actually learn something rather than just looking at a meme and clicking like or angry or whichever. Okay, so now we know what user-generated and standards-based are, and now we'll go into some fact checking. So this is our next point. So we know that many items you'll see on Facebook, like user-generated memes, do not provide real information or context for a situation, but only work to elicit emotional responses. That's how Facebook really works with your algorithm too. It wants an emotional reaction from you, so you're more likely to engage with it. So do be aware of that. It's a very emotional, actually, social media tool. So the best way to find context for a meme or other information you find online is to do what we call lateral reading. That's basically just a fancy way of saying looking to other sources outside of the meme or the post or the website you're looking at to see what other sources have to say about the reliability of the information presented within it. So the meme I shared earlier claimed that Winston Churchill had said that fascists of the future will call themselves Antifa. It's very scary, but first of all, this isn't really an argument. It's not really saying anything about Antifa. It doesn't really matter who said a thing, especially if there's no factual basis for it, right? Additionally, Winston Churchill never even said that. It turns out it's not even true. I did a web search for Winston Churchill Antifa, and pretty quickly, one of my first results, I believe result number 2, was this article by a Churchill expert who has searched quite extensively. He said, scanned some 80 million published words for proof that Churchill said this, but could find no proof. So Churchill most likely did not say this. He almost certainly did not. So that meme is a total lie, basically. It's totally wrong. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at another item here. So this is an item that I saw. I don't subscribe to this page, but a friend pointed out this political memes page that's quite interesting. If you saw this item in your Facebook feed, do you think you would share it? And now remember, a lot of people share things based on a glance at the headline. So we have a poll here. I believe you can put in the chat. I think we have a poll as well where you can. Yes, there we go. So if you saw that post, do you think you'd share it right away? What do you think? Yes or no? And you can text A or B to. All right. Well, okay. So it looks like most of us would not share that. So maybe you don't need this presentation at all. It sounds like you're doing pretty well. Okay, so that's great. We'll give you a few more seconds maybe to respond to the poll. Okay, and I think we're probably okay to move on. I think we probably got most of everyone's responses there. Oh, and then some people said no in the chat as well. So thank you for that. Okay, so this one is a little bit tricky because you have to be careful about content that looks like it's standards-based, but it's actually user-generated. So in this example, the website political, or the Facebook group is political memes, and the post is by truthpost news, right? So it's trying to look like it's standards-based. This example is pretty good because it allows us to explore several means of verifying information that you find on Facebook. So this article was posted in an anonymous political group on Facebook. The political memes, you don't know who made it, you don't know who's running it, who knows, with the claim that the international community supports a Christian genocide in Nigeria. So that's a very inflammatory claim to make. And it is, again, designed to elicit emotions of anger or outrage, again, that will fuel engagement with the post. So it looks like this article is being shared from a news site, but let's do some lateral reading to find out more. Is this story actually true? Before we get into looking at outside sources, we will take a look at the website itself. So I went to truthpost news, and I could immediately tell it did not look reliable. It did not look right. So most of the articles, based on a quick scan, most of them are about immigration to Canada, and they're about blaming the government, the Liberal government for all of Canada's. So there seems to be an agenda there. Used is actually quite racist if you read it, very disturbing, and it's meant to inspire anger in the reader. All of the articles are anonymous and are apparently written by one individual called truthpost. And there's no contact information here at all. You don't know who wrote them, you don't know where this is coming from, no clue. So you can also tell, if we go on to the next slide here, you can also tell something is wrong with this page because it claims to offer both news and opinion pieces, like the National Post, Guardian, they'll offer news and opinion pieces, Globe and Mail, it's pretty typical, right? But in this case, the same articles appear under both headings. So here we have the news category with this article there. And then if you look at the opinion slide, you can see that it's listed there as well. So there's no meaningful distinction being made here between factually accurate information, supposedly, and an anonymous person's opinion. So that's sketchy in itself. So reliable news sources, as I sort of mentioned, they do distinguish news from opinion. And some of them do it better than others. So as you can see here, these are 2 Guardian articles that I took from Facebook. They mark all of their opinion pieces with that big orange label. It's prominently displayed. So you know the one on the left is an article, it's factually based, reporting a story. And the opinions article here is somebody reflecting on that story, but giving her own opinion. And it's very clear that it's an opinion piece. So sometimes you do have to go to the source website to determine this. So in this case, that post on the left is from the National Post. Their Facebook post doesn't indicate that this is an opinion piece or a comment. So you actually have to go to their homepage to double check. You could probably have figured out though that it was an opinion piece based on the topic and who wrote it, but yes, it's an opinion piece and not news. So let's return to our original Truth Post article. So this one here, it's a disturbing article. So where is the author of this piece getting their information? So this is where the lateral reading starts as well, looking at different sources. They only include a few links within the text, as you can see highlighted there. And these are to Fox News and a website called Providence Magazine. So on the left is an excerpt from the Truth Post article. And on the right is the article from Fox News. You can see in the URL there. Let's get the Fox article. So the author, so-called author of the Truth Post piece, has simply copied and pasted without significant alteration large chunks of the Fox News article. So just copying, pasting right into the text. So very little alteration there. If you compare the Truth Post piece with Providence Magazine, the Providence Magazine article, you can see the author has again done the same thing. They've copied and pasted directly from the article. And actually, they've only added a bit more inflammatory language in their article. So they've just beefed it up to make it more anger-inducing. So this entire so-called news article has been directly plagiarized from 2 different sources. And the author, so-called, has only made a few alterations and is not doing any journalism here at all. This is not a journalistic website. This person is copying, pasting, and putting it out there like it's their own. So we'll take it a step further with our lateral reading, and we will look at Fox News and Providence Magazine. What do we know about them? So this is a company called Ad Fontes. They do a media bias chart. They release them every year, every couple of years, I believe. It's a pretty useful resource to get an idea of where prominent news or so-called news organizations fall in terms of reliability and bias. So this is very interesting. If you can see here, I've highlighted Fox News. That is rated, so that's Fox News for the web. That is being rated on the hyper-partisan right politically. And also on the left there, you can see its analysis or high variation in reliability. What they're saying is they don't usually do their own reporting or fact-based writing. They're typically providing analysis only. So they're looking at news articles and they're providing commentary. So very similar to opinion pieces. So they don't rely that journalism. So where do you get, one thing that's fun to do here, we'll do a little activity, is where do you get your news from? Because you can actually look at this chart and see sort of where your favorite news source stands in terms of reliability and in terms of sort of political leanings. The BBC, yeah, BBC is a good one, yeah, because it's right in the middle there and they do fact-based reporting, so it's pretty good. Reuters, AP, those are both pretty good because they are very tend to be right in the middle, and they do original fact-based reporting as well. As you can see, as you go further down the scales on either side, you get to stuff that's really not even news. So InfoWars is not really news, right? So Wonkette, although it's an enjoyable read, perhaps not really news, it's more just opinion pieces. Yeah, so yeah, lots of resources. Yeah, The Guardian, Reuters, yeah, those are pretty good. Those are pretty good sources. Yeah, most people are getting news from right in the middle there, right in the middle top. So that's pretty ideal. Yeah, Washington Post, where is that? Somewhere. Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, it's somewhere up there. Yeah, it's probably near the middle cluster.
Sorry, I actually meant Washington Times. It's actually below the Fox News. I didn't expect that because it sounds like a regular city paper, right?
Yeah, and that's where they trick you because Washington Times is totally a crank website, frankly. So, but they call themselves Washington Times to sound all truthy, right? Like Truth Post News, right? Not Washington Times. It sounds legit, right? But if you look at it and look at it closely, you look at that too. Another one to point out actually is PragerU. They sound like a university, like AU. Look, AU has videos and PragerU has videos. PragerU is not a news source. It's not a university. It's basically a right-wing think tank that pushes out really, frankly, heinous material under the guise of education. And you can see PragerU is rated to the right, and it's really incomplete, unfair propaganda, right? And actually, yeah, we do have this. I'm glad you want to copy this. We have a handout that we'll give you, or we'll send to you at the end, a link to a handout, and there is a link in this website. So yeah, this is extremely useful. So yeah, and there's a link there. Thank you, Joanna. Okay, so very interesting exercise, but now we'll go back to our prepared slides. So we're looking now at Providence Magazine, also an interesting source. It seems at first a pretty benign website. It just shares stories about Christianity and American foreign policy. When you scroll to the bottom of the website, though, when you take a look, they are actually affiliated with the Institute on Religion and Democracy. Okay, well, what's that? If you Google that, you can see that this institute, again, is a right-wing think tank that often shares unreliable information. So that's good to be aware of. Again, not very helpful in determining if the Truth Post article is true. Both Fox News and Providence Magazine have an agenda, and they're not really reliable either. So who knows? This might be true, might not be. One thing we're going to do now is looking at images, and this is a pretty useful and pretty fun thing to do, is you can check images and where they came from. So disturbing images like this one associated with this Truth Post article are again, they're used to generate anger and outrage. That's why memes are effective, right? You have a powerful image associated with a quote. In this case, it's an article with a horrifying image that is meant to scare you, make you feel sad, angry, all those things. It is important, though, to check whether the image is actually what it claims to be. A good way to do this is to do a reverse image search. So this is pretty easy to do. As you can see on the left here, if you click on the image, you right click on it and go to save image as. If you save the image to your computer or your device, then you can do a Google search for reverse image search. So if you do a search for reverse image online, typically a few sites will pop up. This one is called TinEye. TinEye is pretty good. What you do here is you upload the image, and Doris will post a link to TinEye in the chat box. So you upload the image, and then you can usually find out where it originally came from. So on the next slide, we'll see where did this actually come from. And it's very interesting because you can see this is an Adobe stock photo. This image is more than 10 years old. The date there, it was from March 8th, 2010. So this refers to a specific incident and does not reflect the current situation in Nigeria today. So a further indication that Truth Post is unreliable. They're taking a random stock photo and putting it on an article that they're copying and pasting. So right away, not a great article. So, all right. So on the next slide, you can see that we can safely say that Truth Post is not a reliable source, and this article should not be shared as it may contain misinformation, right? But we kind of wonder if the substance of the claim is true in some way. Like Fox is reporting these things. Let's take a look further. Is a genocide of Christians currently happening in Nigeria that the media is ignoring? So what I did was I did a Google News search for genocide Nigeria, and there's not a lot of information there. I did notice a Forbes piece that seems to corroborate this. So that's pretty interesting. But another useful thing to know is there's a date filter in Google News. So once you do your search, you can click on tools, and then you can see this pop up here. It'll ask for you a custom range. So what I did, this article, the Truth Post article was published on February 25th, 2021. So why was the article published on that date? Did something in Nigeria happen to prompt this? Like, what's going on? Did a massive news story come out? What happened? So you can search the news with the customized date range. And so I did this. And I searched for the month prior to the article being posted. So I searched for starting on February 1st, 2021. And as you can see, my results in the next slide here, there was no mention of this. So that's kind of interesting, right? Now moving on, you can see that the Forbes piece was published last summer, and it does offer some corroboration of the Truth Post article. So the author here, you can see her name, Evelina Ochab. She notes here that atrocities are being committed by certain groups in Nigeria, and these incidents are in fact not being widely reported in the Western media. She does not conclusively provide an answer to her headline, is genocide happening as the world turns a blind eye? She doesn't answer that question, but she does note that further action and reporting are needed. This author is also very careful to use language that is not meant to inflame racial or interreligious conflict. And she does not dwell on the religious affiliation of any party in the story, because it's not really important. What's important is the genocide. We don't really it's important that people are being killed, right? So if you go to the next slide here, you can see that this article is far more reliable than the Truth Post one. And here the author is clearly identified, and she is a known expert in this field. So I'm going to take her writing much more seriously than I would the author of the Truth Post article, right? She also provides social media contact information. So again, more inclined to listen to what she has to say about this topic. And as I mentioned before, Truth Post articles, they're all plagiarized by an anonymous article. There's no contact information. If you go to their Facebook page, there's nothing else there. All there is a link to Truth Post news. So about Truth Post, it's all just very, very anonymous. So not very reliable at all. Okay, so I did a bit more digging though, because I wanted to get to the bottom of this. What is actually happening? It kind of took me down a rabbit hole because this is a very nuanced kind of post that was up there. So Genocide Watch, I checked them out. They do corroborate the report of atrocities, but they also note that other groups besides Christians are being attacked. So it's Muslims, government officials, schools, and Christians. So it's just basically a lot of attacks happening, right? Not necessarily against one person. I also wanted to, and I also noted here that they note that the situation in Nigeria is not being considered a genocide. Oh, sorry, next slide. Sorry, I skipped the last one. So there we go, yes. So this is kind of interesting too, this is what their post is from September 2020. They note that it's not considered a genocide by some governmental organizations because it's not part of a systematic organized plan. So that said, this group, which again is really concerned about genocide, does think that genocidal massacres are happening. So there is an issue here that needs to be looked at, right? So I also wanted, though, to look at some other well-known human rights groups to see what they have to say. So Amnesty International, very well known. And this is another tip for you to do too, is if you're looking for specific information really quickly, you can just do a Control F. So if you click on the Control and then F key on your keyboard, you might know about this already, but you might not. You can see this little pop-up box and it allows you to do a word search. So I did a keyword search on the Amnesty International page for this, and there was no mention of genocide at all. So that's kind of interesting because Amnesty International is well known. And they do not also, when they do talk about the conflict there, they don't mention the religion of any victims of the other violent conflicts. So I also went to the Human Rights Watch page on Nigeria as well. And again, a Control F search revealed no mention of genocide. Again, they talk about violence is happening there, but it's no specific calling it genocide against Christians, right? So all of this, what does all of this say about this Facebook post? I think a lot of you know already what the answer is going to be. Certainly, it is not true the international community supports a Christian genocide. That's not true at all. It may be the case that the story is not being covered as closely as it could be in the Western media, right? Like Forbes, the article author there, says it's kind of being ignored. We didn't find a lot of news articles on it, so that's kind of interesting. But that said, you have to look at the bigger picture as well. So there's a shred of truth to this. There's an issue, there's problems happening, but what is the point? What is the purpose of this post really? If you look at the bigger picture, the article itself was clearly copied and pasted from two not very reliable far-right sources. And it goes out of its way to name the perpetrators here as Islamists, which is a word considered to be bigoted, right? Because it's like implying everybody who's Islamic is a terrorist, which is not true, right? So I also wonder, the Forbes article too, by contrast, does not do this. And the author of the Forbes piece was very careful to point out that genocides of religious minorities happen elsewhere in the world as well, and that Christians are not always the victims, which we know is true too. And I would wonder if the Truth Post author would have anything to say about the genocide of Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar. That was a huge story a couple of years ago because Facebook was involved in that as well, because their WhatsApp feature was used to share memes and stories like this that were not true about the Muslim community that created a lot of violence there. So you're very, very careful about this. The purpose of creating and sharing this post really is to incite anger and hatred towards a religious minority and people in Canada too. So it's really, really worrying, right? Not a good source at all. Okay, and then of course, if you look at the further picture too, if you look at the rest of the political memes page, like these are just a couple of really bad, well, I'd say horrible examples, horrifying examples of a really bad page. Political memes page shares all things like this. It's everything about this. You can see the intention here. Very clearly, you can see that they're trying to incite hatred because it's based on the images that they use and the language they use as well. So be careful of words like replacement migration. That's code word, right? We'll talk about that in a bit. And you can see here, the creators of these pages pretty much want to incite fear of immigrants, especially those of color or of other religious backgrounds. So again, this example here, why would you use a photoshopped image of Trudeau and a Muslim woman with the claim that the kind of implied claim that voting by phone is bad? The dog whistle implication here with that language and those images is that immigrants are bad, right? So that's what they're trying to come across here. So again, look at the bigger picture. What are they trying to do with this page and with these posts? And the next slide here, I actually did report that political memes page for hate speech, but Facebook told me that it did not actually violate their guidelines. So again, they're using whistle words, code words to hide their true, intention. So with Facebook, you can report hateful posts and hateful pages, but they have very strict guidelines. People have to literally be inciting violence towards people. So that's pretty troubling. So do be aware of that on Facebook. They don't always, watch out for those things. Again, another thing to be aware of on Facebook, and of course in the world in general, in the news, are dog whistle words, right? So this is language that's generally used to hide racism or extreme viewpoints behind supposedly benign concepts. So when you hear people talking about Sharia law, illegal aliens, it's worrying because there's racist implications behind these things, right? It's coded language to hide people's actual racist views. A couple other words that are red flags, like I pointed out, replacement migration and Islamists. A couple other ones, you're probably hearing a lot about cancel culture lately. That's kind of a right-wing thing to kind of imply that nothing should change. And things like you'll hear a lot about cultural Marxism or extreme leftists, that kind of thing. And even like words like fascist, you gotta be careful when you use fascist too, because are the people you're accusing of that actually fascists, right? So just be aware of the language that is used sometimes to hide darker meanings. Okay, so on the whole, when you are when you're thinking about believing in or sharing a piece of content on Facebook, just remember the 6 W's, right? So who wrote it? Who wrote the news piece? Who created the meme? What point of view is being expressed there? Where does the information come from? Was it plagiarized directly, or is it actual reporting? When was it created? Why is the story or meme important to me? So that's kind of self-reflection, like what emotions does this picture or this meme or this story bring out in me? And why do I feel compelled to share it or comment on it? Why am I engaging with it? Really reflect on your own emotions and your own thoughts. And also, would this information inform or inflame others about the topic? So if I shared this, would it make people really, really angry? Would it get them riled up? Or would it provide them with information? Or maybe both. Like sometimes you can be angry, of course, about injustice or bad things happening in the world. So be careful though about your own motivations in sharing things. Okay, and finally, now back to our previous question. I think we know the answer here. So thinking about that truth post article. Now, would any of you share this? Yeah, no, 100% say no. All right, and I have to admit, I selected A for the last poll just to kind of mix things up. But no, I would not share this either. It's not reliable. It's really inciting hatred. So yes, but we're all on the same page here. So that's really good. All right. And if you wanted to, maybe you'd share it as an example of a bad post, right? Okay, and finally, I'm going to just talk about private groups really briefly. Private groups really can be a breeding ground for false information, right? So some of you might be part of private groups and might be aware of this already. So we'll show you an example here. So if you remember that Churchill meme about Antifa that was not true, this is the group that posted it. So when you look at their about page, they again clearly are using dog whistle words there. They're worried about demographic changes and other populations. So clearly seems to be about white supremacy, right? So it's really worrying, but you got to look at those groups and think, what is this actually about? And sometimes they might say other things, like they might change their description to be something else, but just be aware that you can look at their about and find out what is actually the purpose of the group, right? So groups like this are dangerous because they tend to only allow people in who have the same views as them. So these views typically are never challenged within the group. If the views in the group are challenged, you can be kicked out of the group. So you can join and try to challenge them, but they'll just kick you out anyway. So what happens is people just share and recycle the same ideas and same viewpoints and never get any other outside information. So what's very interesting too, I'll point out, in the summer of 2019, this is very scary, journalists were able to infiltrate a number of private Facebook groups for law enforcement and border officials in the US in which really violent and extremely racist memes, images, and comments were shared. I won't even talk about them because they're very bad, actually, really, really disturbing. This prompted Facebook to make some changes to their group system. So initially, people could add you to a group without your consent. So this happened to a few officers. Apparently, they were put into these groups without knowing it, and they got in trouble later on. But now, Facebook did make a change where if somebody invites you, you have to approve it. Which that seems like they should have done that from the beginning, but they didn't. But anyway, so there's they made some slight changes, Facebook did, but private groups can still be a problem. It's also problematic too, because once you join a group like this, you're seeing the same content over and over again. Everyone's viewpoints are being reinforced in a filter bubble, and you're going to be recommended even more of the same type of groups. So pretty soon, your entire Facebook feed or page rather could be dominated by this type of outrage-inducing material. So you should be very careful about the Facebook groups that you join. And of course, just this final one about COVID, because we're all struggling right now. These kind of groups can be especially dangerous if people decide to share misinformation that might endanger other people's lives. So in this case, an individual shared this message in a private group about, vaccines and COVID. And even though Facebook covered this meme with the warning saying it's false, you can still click through to see it. So they don't take it down, they just cover it up and tell you it's wrong, which I guess is a good step. But if you click through and see it, the people that are in this group are inclined to believe this anyway. It's definitely not true that more people die from the vaccines. Clearly that is absurd, because we've had millions of people vaccinated. We haven't had millions of people dying from vaccines. It's really, really ridiculous. But again, it's pretty scary that people will share this and pass it on, and it spreads like a virus across social media too. So do be very careful about the groups you join, and make sure that you're thinking critically about what you're seeing in those groups if you do join them. Some groups can be really good and really pleasant. Some of them can be really hateful or disturbing or frankly dangerous, right? Like this one. And of course, when in doubt, ask a librarian. This does bring us to the end of our material on Facebook, and we'll conclude with some information about both of our libraries. And thank you all for your attention.
Thanks, Jen. That was such a great examples there. So as Jen said, we want to remind you that AU librarians and staff are here to help. We operate on business hours. You can find our contact information on our homepage by selecting Contact Us. We're available 8:30 to 4:30 Mountain Time, Monday to Friday, and you can fill in a request form, email us, etc. We also have live chat during the day, Tuesday to Thursday, 10:30 to 2:30. We also have a series of different tutorials and guides that might help you navigate information. We did a session with Alice B. Donahue Library in October that was on evaluating internet information. It was a longer session with lots of different questions, so that one's really useful. That's under Internet Searching Research Guide, and our Wikipedia Research Guide also looks at how to evaluate Wikipedia sources. And we also thought you might be interested in our Anti-Racism Research Guide or our Pandemic Support Guide, and we just finished our Women and Gender Studies Guide, which also has a lot of just like open information about women and gender studies topics. And I'll provide the link for the page that leads to all of those here. And now Cheryl's going to talk to us about Alice B. Donahue Library resources and services.
Hi, thank you so much, you guys. That was excellent. Yeah, we I feel like every time I do one of these, I learn so much. So we are also available to ask questions. Unfortunately, we're closed at the moment. The libraries were announced yesterday that they're being closed by the Alberta government. We've closed our doors just a couple days earlier as well in Athabasca due to our cases. So we will hopefully be able to open our curbside pickup again soon, and you can check our Facebook page for an announcement about when that will be available. But right now we're just closed both. So we have our e-resources that are available online, and there's a lot of if you go on there, there's a lot of different things you can check. You can see some examples that Joanna has mentioned there. And we have actually pretty decent wireless access outside the building too. So if you want to pull up near the building and you need to use the internet, we're sorry that our computer labs are closed at the moment, but you can use the wireless outside the building. and hopefully our indoor services will be available soon. Yeah, we have some upcoming programs. We've started doing trivia night at the end of the month. So we did our first one in March, the end of March, but our next one will be April 30th, and it's on Zoom. And we had a ton of fun last month. We'd love if you want to come back. If you have little ones, we have our story time on Fridays on Facebook Live at 10:30. So every Friday you can come and check that out. And our Readers Theater, we have one more week. So if you're really dying to join, you could give me an email and you could join us for the last class. But we have one more Readers Theater class next Wednesday. And then we've been having a lot of fun with that too. Finding ways to connect digitally, even if we can't be together. So any questions? I think our phone number is there, and email I think is on one of our posters here. Yeah. And maybe we could just add that to the chat too. I'll give my programming email if anyone needs to be in contact with me that way as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that, Cheryl. I chose to add in the Readers Theater because it sounded really interesting and I was curious to hear you talk about it.
Yeah, we're having a great time. It's been a really nice, we partnered with the Vermilion Library and got a nice group of people coming, and we're reading all kinds of interesting plays and a little bit of discussion, but it's just on a lunch break so people can come on and have some fun, change up their day a little bit.
Especially everyone that's missing out on some acting and theater stuff. That's great.
Yeah.
So we created a handout, as we said. I put the link in the chat there. So we have contact information for both libraries, some different resources that might be helpful for you, other places you can look for information, i.e. our references. We listened to a really great podcast that's listed on there, Losing Relatives to Fox News, which is actually kind of where we got the idea for the podcast. Jen found it and sent it to us all.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was our inspiration. It's a really good podcast in general. It's basically about media literacy and questioning your own beliefs, and it's really, really well done. A lot of swearing, do be aware.
Good, we were gonna say that, good point. So yes, the link for that is in the chat box, and I'll post it one more time. And that's just a Google Doc, so you can get into it forever, however many times you want. We have time for questions. If you have a weird example you want to use, we have time to browse a couple of examples. You go onto your feed and see something weird. And we have the references that will be also listed in the handout. We also got our slides from Slide Carnival that has lots of free, really awesome templates just to kind of change things up. So I've been really enjoying using them. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording. And then you can feel free to also use the video if you have a specific question or comment.